I'm Tox Easy Peasy, and you're watching 30 Minutes on the Palmer Times. Governor largeTitanic2 is the third governor of Ridgeway. Governor largeTitanic's career in Ridgeway started off as the very first director of RCTA. He then moved on to become a community manager for the entire state of Ridgeway. Governor Large was also an RSP captain. On April 1st, 2022, he resigned as transit director of RCTA to become an assistant director, allowing for his deputy director, Peace Download, to take over. At the time largeTitanic resigned, he was director of RCTA for over a year and a half. largeTitanic2 decided to run for governor in the 2022 winter gubernatorial election with his longtime friend, Joao Human. He won with 71% of the vote. He was later re-elected in the February gubernatorial election. largeTitanic2 is by far the most consequential governor in the history of Ridgeway. However, he feels that he hasn't done all that he has set out to do.
The story will continue in a moment.
My name's Tox Easy Peasy, and I'm here with the governor of Ridgeway tonight. Good evening, Governor. Thank you for being
Toxie.
on our very first production of 30 Minutes on the Palmer Times. How's your day?
Pretty good. How about yours?
It's going pretty good, and excited to get this started. All right, so let's move on to the first topic of discussion. Last night, as of the day this has been recorded, you gave the State of the State address. How do you feel that went?
I feel it left a lot on the table. As someone who works for the Palmer Times and a very skilled journalist, Urbeus BF, I'm not totally sure how to say his name, but he wrote I don't know that I've definitely seen better quality articles written, but he definitely was on point about what he was saying in the article, and what he summed it up better than I could, which was that it was a very nice speech, and it was I tried to inspire confidence among people and just let everyone know that I still don't feel that Ridgeway is, all gone, which I know a lot of people do. But it was pointed out quite correctly that there wasn't much content to the speech. I didn't lay out anything specific. I focused mostly on overarching policy goals, which I think is not what people were expecting. I think that people were looking for concrete ideas, which in all honesty, we don't have a lot of right now. The primary concern that we're hearing from most citizens is that they are seeing a deficit when it comes to the development aspect of the game. They're not seeing a deficit when it comes to the government side. So
Yeah,
it's hard for the government to address concerns that we don't necessarily control, if you know what I mean. And I think that was the general theme of the speech, was that citizens are frustrated. They're frustrated because they're not seeing the kind of results from the development team that they want.
and it is hard for you can't even really do anything about the development aspect of the game. That's more on Square to do, and whatever developers that we have now, we got sourced. We don't have, I won't say we have a lot right now. And with the removal of Dave going on to his endeavors, it's also very limited on the development aspect of the game.
Yes, it is.
So, all right, we'll move
Although
on
I
to.
will tell you, I will tell you that development is progressing. It may not always seem like it. Um, I was speaking with some. I mean, you and I were in a voice chat just a few minutes ago tonight, speaking with a couple of people, which I'm going to try to do a little bit more regularly. But just as I was speaking to them, Square has a particular style of the way that he likes to run things, and it often clashes with a lot of people's assumption of how public he should be.
Yeah,
Square doesn't usually consider other people's opinions about whether or not he should be public with certain things. And if you're going to be working in this environment, you just kind of have to accept that, you know?
yeah. But there also is the booster chat room as well, that
Correct.
where they can get leaks, and that's really the main purpose for boosting the server. And we have seen a lack of leaks in the booster chat room as
That's true.
well.
That's true.
So I feel like there should be a little bit more transparency with development for people who are putting some money into the Discord server.
I think you're right.
All right. We'll move on to the article that your babe, I can't even say it. Your babe's BF decided to do. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So they did decide to write the article last night, the analysis on your speech. He mentioned some pros, but he criticized you in many different areas. They wrote, and I quote, "It can be argued that the speech lacked depth, I can't even say the words, holy.
Specificity.
Yes, that is the word. And substance, it plans to address the issues at hand. The speech lasted about 6 minutes. Is there anything you failed to address last night that you wanted to address to make clear to the public now?"
Um, what I would say is that we rushed into the state of the state this time. And the reason why I did that is because for the first state of the state that we did, which was roughly 4 months ago, it was directly following my election. Well, might have been just before the election. But for the first state of the state, I wrote nothing down. It was completely on the fly. I just said exactly what was in front of me, and it ended up working great. I mean, if you guys also streamed that speech, if you go back and into the Palmer Times archives and review that state of the state, it was 3 minutes long, and it was much better received than this one was. And I was even less specific about policy suggestions and ideas in that speech than I was in this one. So I sort of thought that I could do the same thing again and it would work, you know. But
Yeah,
when you the issue with the last night's state of the state was a combination of things. The first one being number one, what you folks mentioned, which is that it lacked a lot of substantial policy ideas and suggestions, and it did. It was just that's something I can't hide about. But that was a direct result of us rushing. I decided yesterday that it was time to stop waiting and that we needed to sort of light a fire under the community and just get things going again as best as we could. And I decided that there wasn't any time to wait, and there probably was. I probably could have given it a day to write everything. But I wrote it and I scheduled it and I gave the speech all on the same day.
yeah,
So that was probably a misstep on my part. But I think that the other part of it, that the other part that played into why it didn't land as well as it did last time, was because of of the fact that we have disabled in-game voice chat in the game. If you go back and you watch my first State of the State, the room is electric. You will hear shouting from all across the chamber, from the galley, or from the gallery, from the people on the floor. It was an electric environment. That's the way I can describe it, and it felt amazing. I mean, I think we were all uh, very, very enthusiastic and optimistic after that night because we were. I was able to unify the whole chamber as one body, and we had probably 15 to 20 people in the audience, and you guys had probably 15 or 20 watching, which was just it was just amazing. And I noticed the lack of that because if you guys go back and, I mean, that live stream at the end of it, I just ended. I when I ended the speech, I didn't know what to do.
yeah,
It was sort of an awkward moment, and I didn't anticipate it. I Number one, I had not remembered that voice chat had been disabled, but I didn't plan for that at all. Um, I had written the speech to have gaps for applause, which is how State of the Unions and States of the States are supposed to be written. And if you listen to the recording, in the beginning of the speech, I was making those gaps, but I soon realized throughout the midway part through the speech that there was no point in doing that because there was no way that there wasn't any space for that, you know.
yeah.
So there were these awkward gaps of silence in the middle of the speech. So I would say that if I am going to be reelected, if that does end up happening and I end up having an opportunity to do another one of these, I don't know that I'll do it unless we have voice chat back in the game because it just wasn't the same. You know,
Voice chat was a big factor.
it was a huge factor.
It was a huge factor in any event that Ridgeway really had, and I don't think that getting rid of VC for bigger servers was really necessary, as we don't really see enough players
I
reaching
agree.
that maximum. And we
Well,
did
and
see that
something
poll
there's
though.
an interesting point to make there because the most interesting point to make is that we didn't have voice chat before. You know, we
Yeah,
didn't have it. It wasn't even a part of the game, and yet we were still able to make it work. But then, as all of us in the whole community experienced uh, voice chat being in the game, you saw a gradual migration away from Discord because we no longer needed it. You know, it was just, and I think that it created a much more interesting experience. Definitely for me, it created a much more interesting experience in game because it was a proximity thing. You could speak to people if you were close to them; they could hear you. It created a much more physical connection to the
Yeah,
experience that you were having, which is just gone now. You know,
and I feel like how we had it with VC in Ridgeway, it was different than I've seen in other games. We could talk and just have more relations out in Ridgeway. It's it was a big thing, and I'm hoping we get it back soon as we saw that poll come up. Still waiting for that,
there's
but
a poll. I didn't notice that.
Square made a poll, um, asking if we want VC back, and majority of people did vote yes to that. We still haven't seen that yet. I think that was a couple months ago, actually. But
Well, I'm all for that, so I hope we do get that back.
yeah, all right, we'll move on to the next question. So last night during the State of the State, you did mention activity logs. Government employees are divided on if we should do logs in time of struggle and inconsistent game activity like we are experiencing now. Do you support activity logs during times like these?
It's a tough nut to crack because on the one side of the argument, you have people who will argue that you don't want to make the employees play a game that's not thriving. But on the other side of it, you'll have people who will tell you that, well, and I've subscribed to this side for a long time, which is that uh, um, if we continue to exempt logs every time the game slumps, then we're just encouraging that kind of inactivity to continue. You know, so
Yeah,
honestly, I think both sides are right. In this administration, I've never been as hard on the department heads as I said I was going to be about this. I during this last activity slump, I know that there were some departments who did exempt logs.
yeah,
The only thing that and I didn't stop. I mean, I knew they were going to do that. It's just I didn't unless it becomes a major issue where I've got members of the department coming to me and telling me, "Hey, this is a really big problem. We shouldn't do this." I I typically wouldn't get involved. But the only thing that I am never going to do, this administration will never do, as long as I'm governor, we're never going to order departments to stop logs like Governor Medina did. My predecessor did that, and I felt like it was a terrible decision
and the
because now
game
you're
went dead
taking
after it.
because yeah, because now you're taking the decision out of the hands of the department heads and you're making it a physical requirement that they don't have logs, which is just, I feel, a bit of an, it's not an overstep of the governor's power because it is something that I am allowed to do, but it just feels like something that you do when you haven't consulted with your department heads. And it felt like the wrong decision when I saw that announcement.
And
But
you
you had
feel it should be a mutual decision between all department heads on whether this should occur where you were
in a
to cancel
normal,
all activities.
in a normal organizational environment, I would say no, but
Hmm.
this is different. You know, I've led many things. This is different because you're talking about people's leisure time and what they want to spend it on. So we can't just have a sweeping mandate that requires people to play the game or not, unless there is something for them to gain by doing it. Because this isn't a business and it's not, for better or worse, it isn't a government agency. This is for pleasure. That's all it is. And so we have to. So I agree. It has to be a mutual decision, and not just between myself and the department heads, but between myself, the department heads, and the people who work for them. Because we can require logs all we want, but it doesn't mean anything if those people are not committed to actually doing them.
Hmm. And is there a way for all department heads to have communication? Is there
Oh, absolutely.
active communication for them right now where they can all
Yes.
consult about this issue?
Yep, there is. We haven't utilized it as much as we should, but those apparatuses do exist for sure.
All right, that's good to know. We'll move on to the next question. We'll get off activity here. So, A huge point in your speech last night was remembering how the state got to where it is, not in inactivity, but its success. However, during a time like this, during inconsistent activity, were you attempting to bring hope to the Ridgeway people by mentioning this?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we get into a there's an attitude among the, and I believe it's shared by the majority of people in the community. But there's an attitude that, and I mean, this kind of attitude is something that you will see about surrounding any game. It's not even limited to Roblox, but there's an attitude that people have when it comes to a relationship between themselves and the developers of the games that they play, which is that they expect things to be done. They expect things to change. They expect updates. They expect these things. And there's an attitude of entitlement. There's an attitude of, well, we're owed this, you know. And the point I was trying to make is that rather than sitting around and waiting and complaining that we haven't received what we're due, what we're owed, what we're entitled to,
Yeah,
we should my point that I was trying to make there was that that is the wrong attitude if we want to succeed in any sort of way. Because passing the blame or the responsibility for making things better onto someone else is not how Ridgeway was started.
yeah,
I mean, when I first came to, and I know this is kind of a specific personal story, it doesn't really apply to everybody, but when I came to Ridgeway, we did not have a transit service, and there was not plans to make one until 2024. When I first created the Ridgeway County Transit Authority, I was told by developer oversight that it was not going to happen. I was told that, okay, yes, this is on our agenda, but we have no plans to do it this year. And I was told just no, we're not doing that. Sorry, move on.
hmm
I didn't stop working on it. I made plans, I wrote documents, I set up the organizational structure, I wrote the handbook to the point where all the developers had to do was make the infrastructure to make it work. And it was already done, ready to go.
yeah.
And one thing that I learned is that Square, and at the time Dave, feed off of the passion of others as well as the other way around. And I said in the end of the speech, this is a place where if you work, you can succeed. And I
Yeah,
believe that's true. I believe that's true. I believe that we are a community that rewards hard work. And if we're not, we should become that. But I feel that just sitting back and waiting for things to get better on their own is just the wrong attitude if we want to get better. If we
so
want any if we want anything to if we want to enjoy ourselves here, even if we don't necessarily want to improve things, but if we just want to enjoy it for what it is.
yeah, and you did bring the transit authority to the game. You did make everything, set up the infrastructure. So could you say that we could encourage others to do the same thing, and the developers would kind of
Well,
go
look at
along with
Pinkerton.
that? Yeah,
Look at Pinkerton, look at Palmer Times, look at RNN, look at Alder Group. These are things that people created without asking the developers, without receiving permission, without receiving some kind of sanction. Square created the RNN van after RNN was already established, already passionate, already working hard every day, already out there doing the news, all this different stuff. Square sees that and goes, they deserve this. You know,
yeah,
it wasn't, well, we'll create the van and then hopefully the news organization will follow. No, because he knew, and I do, because anyone who runs an organization has to know this, is that you reward the hard work, you reward people putting the effort in, because those are the only ones that are going to make anything great.
exactly.
That's my philosophy on it, I guess.
And I do agree with that. Businesses are a big aspect in the game, even though they do go overlooked a lot. If the community does get together and can like create businesses, they do have a chance of getting developer attention.
But people don't under people underestimate the level of work that is required to make all of this happen. They do. I mean, I feel that there's a portion of the community that doesn't understand just how much work is required to make anything awesome, you know?
Yeah, it did take a little while to get the Palmer time set up, but once we got it set up, we got to add to it, and then Square did notice it.
Yeah,
So
but it takes work. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes finding a way to keep yourself motivated even when you're not. And you have to modulate, or not, that's the wrong word. You have to manage the feeling that this becomes a job because you don't want that. Um, if you get the feeling that it becomes a job, it's not fun anymore, which is the whole point. So you find yourself, especially with something like this, and like with other things that I've started. That's why I mean that's why I resigned from RCTA. It started to become work. It wasn't fun anymore.
The story will continue in a moment.
yeah, out to the public.
I did.
Why did you choose the questions that you chose, and most importantly, why did you issue this survey? Were you trying to take a different approach to your job, or is this somewhat of a trial?
Um, I'm the leader of the state, to put it bluntly,
Yeah,
and there's there's a disconnect I have felt between there's this is a complicated issue because you have the the community wants what they will say what they think that they want, but you will find that when you ask them what they if you actually ask them what they want, you'll often get a different answer because it's very easy to say that you want something done, but then if you actually ask them to think about it and respond with an actual opinion that they have to sit and formulate, the answer is oftentimes different. This is not the first one of these that I've done. The
yeah,
reason I did it was because I feel like the community is not sure what they want because well, they are sure what they want. They want more development. But they know that the government can't exactly do that. So we do have like I do have I've known Square for a long time. So has my chief of staff, Ariam.
yep,
There's no saying that we can't have discussions with him about this kind of stuff. But we don't want to step forward and make the promise that we can make this stuff happen because in most cases we we either can and it's going to take a lot longer than people want, or we can't at all. Those are the two typical things that are going to happen. It's and so it's this it's a matter of we don't we I want to ascertain where in the areas where the government can make change that people feel change needs to be made, if that makes sense. Because the questions that I have on there are: is the criminal justice system fair? Um, do you do you feel that crime is a problem that we need to address? And if so, how much? Do you feel that there are an adequate amount of law enforcement officers in game? Do you feel that there are uh, do you feel in general that should we allow political parties? Do you feel that questions like that where the answer to those questions and the community's actual opinion can and will drive action from my administration and from the Senate? Because those items in that survey, it's not everything, but it's most things. Those items in that survey are things that we can actually do to make things better. Like one of the questions I believe is that do you feel that there are enough opportunities for people that are seeking work and are you employed? And I don't ask for usernames for
yeah.
this intentionally. I don't want people to feel like they're telling me things that they it's important that it remains. And there's always the possibility for fake responses when you get that, but I don't feel that'll happen.
I do feel
Um,
like this survey is a good way for the community to kind of give their opinion without having to be given their usernames, like, and just be known. They can be
right,
anonymous about it.
and they can be as candid as they want, you
Yeah,
know.
and
So
but
the
they
reason
do.
behind it is just that the reason behind it is just that I want to give the community the chance to tell me what they're feeling in a organized way, because I can join as many voice chats as I want and ask people their opinion, but in all reality, I'm not going to get organized thoughts from them. I'm going to get the kind of discussions that you and I have had with them earlier this evening, which was just that we think there needs to be more development. Okay, expand on that. How? Where? What's the most important thing that we should focus on? Because we can't. It's we have to attack this bit by bit. That's how we move forward. We
Yeah.
can't we can't legislate our opinion into law. We can't legislate development into law. We can't make these grand ideas, and we have to formulate them into actual solutions. Part of
Yeah.
the reason why it even happened was because of Herbe SPF's article. I read it and I decided, huh, we should probably figure out what the actual challenges are. And I realized that the administration, we really don't know. You know, it's
Yeah.
we can identify the development ones for sure, but whether or not the citizens feel that the legal sector is serving them appropriately, we don't know that. It's important that we find that out. It's whether or not our internal affairs agencies are working the way they're supposed to. These are all things that we can change. These are all things that we're responsible for. These are all things that we need to be managing. And development and the lack thereof or the quality of it is always going to captivate the attention of everybody in the community. But we have to make sure that the government is doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is managing everything else. If you
Yeah.
know what I. But yeah, that's hope. I hope that answers that.
You do, and you also do catch a lot of the blame because
Oh,
this is
of course,
this of course this is my opinion. Everyone has put a lot of the blame on you because you're the next step down from development because you can affect the entire state with whatever decision
absolutely.
you decide to make. So I do believe that the survey will be helpful for you to make any changes that for the state of Ridgeway could be very beneficial.
I just want people to feel heard.
Yeah, and this is a good place for you to be heard. All right, we'll move on to the next question. So this is actually our last one. Do you think that our government has been functioning lately? The Senate is inactive and the government is unreliable. DevType wrote an article that hasn't been released yet. Um, he did write about this. He also wrote that if the Senate is inactive and the government is debating within, is the government truly functional?
The short answer to your question of whether or not I think the government has been I mean, it depends on the time frame you're talking about, but definitely for the last couple of months, the answer is no, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and there's no way that anybody can skirt around the truth that way. We have to be honest with ourselves about that, and I share some of the blame for it, for sure. The buck stops with me. I run the government.
Mhm.
Um, the Senate has been the subject of constant infighting. Um, they seem to have there's been an attitude in the Senate that's been prevalent ever since it's been created, and that's just been that we consistently, as a community, seem to elect senators who do not have the level of steadfast commitment that you would see from a department head or from the National Guard or from any number of people who are committed for the long term, people who are going to be here, who are going to stay with us through thick and thin.
Mm.
You don't. We've never seen that from the Senate.
Yeah,
It's always been people who are there to make noise and to enjoy the bullshitting of it all.
exactly.
And I feel that the only time that the Senate is ever productive is when I am pushing something through. So I share a lot of the blame for that too, because in reality, the Senate can be productive, but it requires that I'm the one pushing on the whole entire system. Because the times where we have gotten things through, and I know these are all controversial bills, so I don't want to debate them, but maybe we can if you want. But when it comes to like
Yeah.
the MSA,
Yeah.
throwing something like that down on the table like our administration did is just creating a fire intentionally. I mean, really, that's what that bill was. It was also forced upon us by government, by group management. But
Yep.
even if it wasn't, even if that hadn't been the case, it still would have been the same sort of debate. And I've been somebody that always talks about stability and how we have to make sure that we don't have uh, constant resignations and all this different crap. But I find myself looking back 4 months ago and missing the chaos. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the Senate is pretty chaotic right
But
now.
I find myself missing the organized chaos that we used to be. Like
Yeah,
I, all the newscasters here, take a minute after the interview and go watch the first State of the State and just feel the energy in that room. And
it was
every
all
senator. Sorry, go ahead.
organized chaos before, and
Yeah,
now it seems to be really unorganized, which is kind of ruining the attitude of a lot of senators, a lot of heads in the
but
government.
I this is a point that I've tried to make over the course of I don't know, 5 years. But these positions, governor, lieutenant governor, the Senate, Justice Department, Secretary of State, anything I mean, even departmental leadership positions,
Yeah,
they are what the holder makes of them, and it's nothing more and nothing less. We had I have great respect for my predecessors in this position, as well as the county executives, but going back to when this position originated, there was a thought when I was elected that the governor was not a useful position, that really he couldn't do anything, and that he didn't really need to exist. That was the general thought. You know what I mean? Like that was
yeah.
an attitude that people in the community had.
But now we can see that it's in a very important
Right.
role
But
within.
that isn't because the position changed. It's not. It's because I've taken the tools that were left to me by my predecessors and by developer oversight, taken them and done something different. And the Senate can do that too.
Yeah.
They can. They really can. We just have never seen it. And that's not to say that we've never had any good senators. We definitely have. But I feel that we've never had the kind of passion
Hmm.
from them. And I think
Yeah.
that the result of that is because in an ideal world, my inactivity would have caused an investigation. They would
Yeah.
have come knocking down my door. Where's the governor? What's going on? Because their job is to question the executive branch. It's part of their job, whether I like it or not. Doesn't matter if I like it or not. They have to do it. It's one of the things that everyone votes for them to do. And
You're
they've
just
all
expected. You're
right.
expected to uphold your duties.
Yes. And they've always one of the Senate's always followed my direction, which I've always appreciated. This whenever anything major does need to get done, and I get them in a room and I go, "You need to just trust me. This is what we need to do." They all go, "All right, we'll trust you. We'll do it." You know. But
Yeah. I feel
what
that's
about the?
needed
But
right now.
it is needed. But what about the other times? What about when I don't have a policy idea, like right now? I can't always be the one that's stepping up. But it is my job to. And like I said before, I'm the leader of the state. The buck stops here. It always will. But
Yeah.
this Senate election, I implore everyone to give me the Senate that I need to get this to get things done that we need to get done.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about running for Senate, that's the issue. The smart people generally don't. We don't get the people like you guys who go out and start your own company and work really hard to make your thing. You don't join the public sector
Yeah.
because you're doing your own thing. But I don't know. Realistically, I could probably ramble on forever. But
Yeah, it is a really hard position too. We, I do believe that the
It's
Senate
what
does
you make of
need,
it.
yeah, the Senate does need a little bit more leadership. We can see in Senate Post right now, there is a lot of discourse between the
And to some
senators.
extent, there always is going to be.
Yeah,
But like you said before, and like I said before, there's a difference between disorganized, useless chaos and chaos that produces something of value. You know?
and yeah, and what's happening in the Senate right now, it's not really,
No,
yeah,
absolutely
it's
not.
not really working out.
And we had a senator that resigned on the spot last night during the State of the State.
Yeah, it's really chaotic.
That was Daniel Reagan. He's
Yep.
resigned from the Senate. And then we had Rylan, who ran for the Senate purely as a joke, didn't expect or intend to win, got elected anyway, has all of his cards and his chips in another community, mind you. Continues to this day. He has no commitment to Ridgeway. He never did.
Yeah.
Is now the president pro tempore of the Senate and is likely going to be running for office again.
And it was a really
We
that was also a really chaotic time. The
Yes, it
only
was.
reason that the Senate got active again was because a couple of the senators decided that there was not enough activity within the Senate, so they needed to host an emergency session, which was not technically allowed. It was a really confusing.
It's a controversial thing
Yeah.
because I know that my lieutenant governor will tell you every day that it wasn't allowed, and then Senator Horace will say that it was. I didn't choose to get involved in it, but it speaks to there has been a lack of guidance, both from my end, from Joao's end as president of the Senate, as well
Mhm.
as from the developers' end of things, because the Senate, I mean, the Senate and the um, county board that it was originally came from were all created on the heels of NUSA. We, myself, Jeff Gralius, and everybody else that came from NUSA, we were all used to this completely dysfunctional and totally useless political system, which is what NUSA continues to have to this day. But we were all used to that, and so we decided this is going to be different. We're not going to have a Senate or a legislative body or an executive one that is as disorganized and completely as dysfunctional as NUSA's was. So the Senate was very tightly controlled by developers to the extent that to this day we still are not allowed to have a law unless it is approved by DO. We still can't. That's always been the case. Law cannot change without a DO assent.
Do you
And
believe that
Square has been lenient on it. He's not
you
super crazy, but go ahead.
do you believe that developer oversight should be a little bit more strict on the Senate right now?
No, I don't. Not at
All
all.
right.
What I will say though is you can't do the opposite of that, which is what we did in NUSA. NUSA is a lesson to learn from everyone who runs a group or runs a government. And that is that completely disengaging your oversight and letting everything run wild means that the credibility of the organization will deteriorate until it's a laughingstock. And that happened with the US Congress. It was a laughingstock. Nothing they ever did was anything of consequence because everyone realized that you can just ignore them. It didn't matter what law they passed. Everything continued as normal. Because they would pass and do such ridiculous things
Yeah,
and nobody cared. No one stopped them, you know?
and it was
So
just normalized.
we need a balance. We need someone to make sure that they're in check, but also to allow them the freedom to legislate the way they want, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but it also has gotten to the point where the Senate doesn't even show up
Correct.
to a lot of the meetings that are decided to have, but they also are announced on the day of, which can make it hard to schedule. It's just
Yeah,
messy all around.
it is, and that's definitely something that needs some work. And there's only one more after the Senate election. There's one more month until my election comes up, and in 2 months I might not be sitting in this chair. But if I am, I hope that the people will give me a chance to do it right this time.
Yeah, and
Um,
you have done a
because
great job so far, I'd say.
this term has been one of the most unproductive that we've ever experienced. All of the things that we set out to accomplish at the start of this term, we did not accomplish. I can't hide that. We just didn't. I mean, I got elected, and Ridgway's activity slump. I got reelected, and Ridgway's activity slump started pretty much immediately after that. It
Yeah.
was it was a couple of weeks after the governor election, then the lights turned off, and it was just done for a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and right now it just seems that people of Ridgeway are depending on the government to do something about the game, even if that means introducing a new
I,
law.
I I really do think that they're confused, but they want action. They want us. It. I almost feel like the people don't really care even what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, you could
So
introduce some law that could be really
right,
controversial, but they just want something that is to talk
something to
about.
yeah, exactly. Which is honestly, I'm not going to lie about this. Part of why I think I want to do something like that. You know what I mean? Let's find something that we can have a little fun with. You know?
Yeah, and even causing a little bit of this would be organized chaos, and that would be
Right.
bring a little bit more activity.
Yeah.
It is something to talk about. Like when you brought that gun law, that was a
Right.
huge.
Huge thing because that was a 50-50 decision. That was 51-49. And I didn't even know that until after it was passed. That was such a profound experience one of my
Yeah,
as governor because I mean, the NRA will always tell you that I knew that it was bad and all this different stuff. But I mean, you can believe them if you choose to. But
yeah,
we proposed that law. The Senate proposed that law. I rewrote it to make sure that it would work with the current legal structure. Um, and we had every assumption that people wanted it. We really did. I mean, beyond all of what people will tell you, beyond all of the controversy that came from that, the entire Senate, that was a unanimously passed bill. The entire Senate, the government, we had every belief that people wanted that. We thought this is what people want. This is what we're going to do. And I it was so interesting how that was just like bam, divide the community in half because you can't make the generalization that no one wanted it.
yep,
Because a lot of people did contact us and say, "Hey, these guns need to be illegal. Like this is causing problems in game, and we can't arrest." Like it was mostly the police departments who would tell us, "Hey, every time that we arrest these people, we can't charge them with unlawful possession of a firearm because this is a legal gun." You know,
yeah,
and
and
so it was like,
then
okay, that's a completely reasonable point. But then you'd have people on the other side who just wanted to use them. You know,
yeah, and we after you did introduce that, there was um
oh man,
the
here's the
sheriff.
next. I mean, the next thing that Palmer Times recorded, the press
Yeah,
conference. You guys streamed the press conference that I had right after that. And
wow,
Timbo, if you want, you can post that too. But that press conference was, I think, over 2 hours long. Um,
and mostly everyone stayed for it. It was a really
yeah,
big event.
it was a huge press conference, was the biggest I've ever had.
Yeah,
Um, but like I was saying to you before, yeah, it was controversial. Yeah, it was a disaster, but you almost miss it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You
and
almost do.
after that was passed, Tacos did release the permit
Very reluctantly, I had to
application.
ask him 19 times, but yes, he did
We
eventually do it.
and we also only see like department heads like holding a permit right now, and the
Yeah,
last
this is my second day being quote unquote back on the job, and that's the first complaint I've heard. Um,
time those were released was 3 months ago. So it's been a
yep,
little while since.
absolutely. We need to get back into it. Um,
Exactly.
Something that I mentioned at the end of the state of this state was that we need to implement the Citation Reform Act. A lot of people don't realize that this law was passed. The
Yeah,
Citation Reform Act changed our entire legal structure. It was a joint agreement between me, the NRA, and the Senate. It was everybody working together.
yeah,
And we changed citation wait times. We changed fines. We changed everything. I mean, if you go read that bill, it shakes up the whole thing. It changes everything. It
yeah.
makes things that were felonies not felonies anymore.
It is a
And
hard issue though.
it was never implemented. That law was passed. It was signed, and it's still not. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's not. I don't mean to say that, oh, the government has no work to do. We absolutely do. It's just hard to stay focused, if you know what I mean.
Exact. So as we were just talking about the gun law that was passed and the permits that were brought, it is an issue. Without having dev support, we don't want law enforcement officers going to detain people when they see a micro, but there's also
Right,
no way for them to, show that they have a permit for it.
right.
So that is a huge issue. I do kind of realize I can see where tacos is at. It's kind of hard to keep
Absolutely.
releasing permits for that. So
Um, so Dev Gralius before he see, it's weird to talk about David because it's almost like I'm talking about a dead person. He's not dead; he's
yeah,
left. But I had to stop myself from saying uh, in loving memory or whatever. But Dev Gralius, God rest his soul,
rest in peace.
created what he called the RFLID Plus, which was supposed to beat this system. It's a green card, and it was meant to be implemented into the game, but it never was. Uh, that's definitely something that we need to work on for sure. I hope that we can do that it's eventually because it's not difficult at all to manage something like that. All you have to do is run the Trello board directly from the game, which is easy enough.
Yeah,
So the
just
system is
something
in
to show.
place. The system is in place. We just have to make the connection. So I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't even remember that until just now. So we need to do that for absolute sure. But
All right, I think that's a good place to end. Thank you again for joining us on 30 minutes.
absolutely anytime.